My roommate and best friend of 7 years slept with my boyfriend the entire time I was in the hospital recovering from a car accident. I didn't find out from either of them. I found out from a get well card that fell out of her purse when she visited on day 13 of my recovery. It was addressed to him, signed, "All my love, forever yours," with lipstick kiss marks on the envelope. The crash had happened 3 weeks earlier. A semi ran a red light and T-boned my Honda on the driver's side. I spent 4 days in a coma, woke up to 2 broken legs, a fractured pelvis, and enough metal in my body to set off airport detectors for life. My boyfriend called me every morning at 8 a.m., visited every evening at 6 p.m., and held my hand while I cried through physical therapy. He never missed a single day, neither did she. My best friend since college showed up with magazines, snacks I could actually stomach, and endless optimism about my recovery. She'd paint my nails because I couldn't reach my toes anymore. She'd brush my hair when the nurses were too busy. She became my lifeline to the outside world, telling me about work drama and neighborhood gossip while I lay there useless. What I didn't know was that they were arriving together, coordinating their visits so they'd never overlap by more than 15 minutes, planning their deception with the same care people use for surprise parties. The card changed everything. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just cried and said it had started the night of my accident when he was devastated and she was comforting him, as if grief were an excuse for betrayal, as if my broken body lying in intensive care somehow made them the victims of circumstance. He admitted it too eventually, said he'd fallen in love with her while watching her be so devoted to me. The irony was suffocating. She'd been devoted to visiting the woman whose boyfriend she was sleeping with every night. I was released from the hospital 6 weeks after the accident. My insurance covered a home health aide for 3 hours daily, but I needed round-the-clock help. Couldn't cook, couldn't shower alone, couldn't even get to the bathroom independently. My boyfriend volunteered immediately. So did she. They both insisted on moving in temporarily to care for me. I said yes. They looked relieved, probably thinking I'd forgiven them or was too dependent to refuse. But I had other plans. I spent the next month documenting everything. I recorded their whispered conversations when they thought I was sleeping. I took photos of them being careless, holding hands in my kitchen, kissing by the medication shelf. I compiled evidence like I was building a legal case because that's exactly what I was doing. See, the accident hadn't been the semi-driver's fault after all. It was my boyfriend's. He'd been texting her while driving me to a doctor's appointment for my wisdom teeth removal. He'd run the red light while looking at his phone, directly into oncoming traffic. The police report listed him as the driver, me as the passenger. His insurance was covering everything. But insurance fraud investigations get very interested when someone causes an accident that nearly kills their girlfriend, then moves in with the girlfriend and the woman he was texting at the moment of impact. Especially when there's proof he was having an affair. Especially when his policy had a clause about gross negligence. I sent everything to his insurance company, the police department, and a personal injury attorney. Then I told them both to get out. They left confused, still thinking they'd gotten away with it. The lawsuit hit them 4 days later. I'm suing him for gross negligence and her for alienation of affection. The insurance company dropped his coverage entirely and is pursuing their own fraud investigation. But here's what they don't know yet. Here's what's going to destroy them both. My lawyer found something in my medical records that changes everything. Something the doctors discovered during surgery that neither of them could have anticipated. Something that makes what they did so much worse than even I realized. The medical discovery was simple. I was pregnant. 11 weeks when the accident happened. The impact had caused a placental abruption, but somehow, impossibly, the pregnancy had survived. The doctors had put me on strict bed rest, warned me about complications, and told me the odds weren't great. But they'd seen the heartbeat on the ultrasound 3 days before I woke from the coma. My boyfriend knew. The hospital had called him as my emergency contact when they discovered it during surgery. He'd been informed of every development, every risk, every update about the baby's status. He'd signed consent forms for treatments. He'd been in the room when they did the first ultrasound after I woke up, and he'd never told me. Not once in 6 weeks did he mention that I was carrying his child. He just kept showing up, holding my hand, playing the devoted boyfriend, while sleeping with my best friend every night. I found out on day 19 of my hospital stay when a new nurse asked how I was feeling about the pregnancy. I stared at her, confused, thinking she'd mixed up my chart with someone else's. She pulled up my file, showed me the ultrasound images dated from the night of my accident, and suddenly the extra monitoring made sense. The specialized medications. The way certain doctors would pause before discussing my prognosis. When I confronted him that evening, he turned pale, started stammering about not wanting to stress me during recovery, said he was planning to tell me when I was stronger. But I knew the truth. He'd been hoping I'd lose the baby naturally so he could start fresh with her. No complications, no ties to the woman he'd nearly killed. The baby made everything different legally. My attorney actually laughed when I told him. Not a happy laugh. More like the sound someone makes when they realize how badly someone else has messed up. He explained that causing an accident while texting your mistress, nearly killing your pregnant girlfriend, then hiding the pregnancy from her while continuing the affair created liability he'd rarely seen in his career. The lawsuit grew. My medical bills were approaching $380,000. The pregnancy complications added another $150,000 in specialized care. My attorney projected long-term costs for potential developmental issues from the trauma, therapy for both me and the child, and loss of income from being unable to work. But the criminal angle was what really interested the district attorney's office. Apparently, hiding someone's pregnancy from them while making medical decisions on their behalf walks a very fine line with assault, especially when that person caused the pregnancy to be at risk in the first place. I was discharged on bed rest at week 8 of my hospital stay. My insurance approved a home nurse for daily visits, but I still needed someone there constantly. My boyfriend volunteered again. So did she. Standing in my hospital room, holding hands now that I knew, asking if I wanted their help. I looked at them both, really looked at them. He'd lost weight, probably from stress. She had this glow about her, the kind people get when they're happy. They matched somehow, like they'd been together for years instead of weeks. I said yes again. They moved back in that afternoon. My mom flew in from Arizona the next day. She'd wanted to come earlier, but I told her I had help. She'd met my boyfriend twice, liked him well enough. She'd met my roommate at my college graduation. When I told her everything, she went completely still. My mother is not a violent person. She's taught kindergarten for 32 years and does yoga every morning. But she walked into my apartment, looked at them sitting on my couch like they belonged there, and said, "You have 20 minutes to get your things and leave before I call the police." My boyfriend started to argue. Mom pulled out her phone and actually dialed. They were gone in 15 minutes. That night, she sat on the edge of my bed and cried. Not for long, she's not the type. But she kept apologizing for not being there, for trusting them, for not seeing what they were. "I'm going to help you destroy them," she said finally. "Whatever you need." What I needed was documentation. My attorney had been clear about that. The affair by itself was damaging but not devastating. The pregnancy changed things, but we needed to prove he'd known and actively hidden it. We needed to show a pattern of deception and negligence. Mom became my investigator. She'd spent 3 decades managing classrooms of children, which apparently translates well to managing evidence collection. She organized my recordings by date and content. She created spreadsheets of their visits, cross-referenced with my medical records to show which days they'd seen ultrasounds or received updates about the baby. She found his phone records. He'd left them on the kitchen counter, probably forgot about them in his rush to leave. Hundreds of texts to my roommate during my hospital stay. Many sent from my hospital room while he was supposedly supporting me. She found more too. Credit card statements showing hotel rooms. Restaurant receipts from places he told me he couldn't visit me because he was working late. Flower deliveries to my roommate's office on days I was having procedures done. My attorney called it a goldmine. The insurance company called it fraud. The police called it evidence. But the thing that made everything unravel completely was what Mom found in my roommate's bedroom. She'd left so quickly she hadn't cleared everything out. Shoved in the back of her closet was a box. Inside were cards, photos, little mementos. They dated back 9 months. The affair hadn't started the night of my accident. It had been going on since before I even got pregnant. I sat on my bed, holding evidence that my entire relationship had been a lie, and something in me went cold. Not angry, not sad, just calculating. They'd been planning this, building a relationship while pretending to be loyal, and when the accident gave them an excuse, they'd just gotten sloppy. The pregnancy was 15 weeks along when I lost it. I'd made it past the dangerous first trimester, was starting to believe it might actually survive. Then one morning I woke up bleeding and everything ended in an emergency room that wasn't the one where I'd spent 6 weeks. Different doctors, different nurses, no one who knew my story. Just standard miscarriage protocol and a social worker who asked if I had support at home. I was alone when it happened. Mom had gone back to Arizona 3 days earlier. She'd used all her sick days and needed to get back to work. I'd told her I'd be fine. The home nurse was coming daily. I had friends who'd started visiting once they heard about the betrayal. But none of them were there at 4 a.m. when my body decided it was done trying to keep a baby alive in a traumatized environment. I called my attorney from the hospital bed, told him what happened. There was a long pause. Then he said, "I'm sorry for your loss. This changes the lawsuit." It did. The baby's death added wrongful death claims. My medical trauma now included miscarriage. The psychological damage expanded. My attorney actually sounded uncomfortable explaining how much more my case was worth now. I felt nothing. Just listened to him talk about damages and compensation and justice. Hung up and stared at the ceiling until a nurse came to check my vitals. They discharged me the next day. No reason to keep me longer. I took a car service home because I couldn't drive yet, climbed my stairs one at a time, and found my apartment exactly as I'd left it, except for the envelope taped to my door. No name, no return address, just my apartment number written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from my roommate. 3 pages, handwritten, explaining everything. How guilty she felt, how the affair had started because I'd been distant, how she'd fallen in love with him and couldn't help it, how she hoped someday I'd understand that the heart wants what it wants. She mentioned the baby once. Said she was sorry for my loss and knew it must be hard. Not that she was sorry for sleeping with my boyfriend while I was pregnant with his child. Not that she was sorry for helping him hide my pregnancy from me. Just sorry it was hard. I read it twice. Then I photographed every page and sent them to my attorney. Turns out written confessions are useful in court. The lawsuit moved fast after that. My boyfriend's insurance company settled their portion immediately. They wanted nothing to do with a case involving affair-related negligence, hidden pregnancy, and wrongful death. The payout was enough to cover my medical bills with substantial leftover. But I wasn't interested in settling with him personally. My attorney had explained my options. I could take a settlement, probably a significant one given the circumstances. Or I could go to trial and make everything public. I chose trial. My attorney warned me it would be brutal. that I'd have to testify about the affair, the pregnancy, the miscarriage. That defense attorneys would try to make me look vindictive or mercenary, that it would drag on for months and cost me emotionally. I didn't care. I wanted them to stand in front of a judge and jury and explain their choices. Wanted it on public record what they'd done. Wanted everyone they knew to read about it in court documents. My roommate tried to avoid being served, changed her address, stopped answering her door, blocked my attorney's calls. But you can't hide from a process server forever. They got her at her new job, handed her the lawsuit in front of her coworkers. She called me that night. First time we'd spoken since I kicked her out. She was crying, asking why I was doing this. Saying she'd already lost her best friend. Wasn't that enough punishment? You helped him hide my pregnancy, I said. You slept with him while I was losing our baby. And you wrote me a letter about how your heart couldn't help what it wanted. She started to respond, but I hung up. Blocked her number. Her attorney could talk to my attorney. Discovery was worse than I expected. I had to turn over my medical records, therapy notes, personal journals. They requested my phone records, email history, social media messages. My attorney said it was standard, that they were looking for anything to undermine my credibility. They found my dating app messages from 2 years ago. Tried to suggest I'd been unfaithful first. Never mind that those messages predated my relationship with my boyfriend by 8 months. They found texts where I'd complained about my roommate to other friends. Used them to argue we'd never really been close, that I was exaggerating our friendship. They found my medical history and discovered I'd had an abortion at 19. Tried to bring it up in court to suggest the miscarriage wasn't as traumatic as I claimed. The judge shut that down immediately, but the damage was done. Everyone in the courtroom knew. My attorney prepared me for their strategy. They were going to paint me as a vindictive ex-girlfriend weaponizing the legal system. They'd minimize the affair, suggest it had happened after our relationship was already over. They'd claim my boyfriend had hidden the pregnancy out of misguided concern, not malice. What they couldn't explain away was the timeline. The affair had started before I got pregnant. He'd been texting her when he caused the accident. He'd made medical decisions about my pregnancy while sleeping with her. Those facts were just facts. The trial started on a Tuesday in October. I wore a navy dress my mom had bought me, low heels I could actually walk in now, minimal makeup. My attorney had coached me on appearance. Looked sympathetic but not dramatic. Injured but not broken. The jury was 7 women and 5 men. I watched them watch me as I walked to the witness stand, wondered what they saw. A victim? A scorned woman? Someone out for revenge? My attorney started with basic questions. How long had I known my boyfriend? When had we started dating? How serious was the relationship? Then he moved to the accident. I described the morning of my wisdom teeth appointment, being nervous about the procedure. My boyfriend offering to drive me. The last thing I remembered was him laughing at something on his phone, then waking up 4 days later in a hospital bed, unable to feel my legs. 2 of the female jurors were crying by the time I finished describing my injuries. The foreman was taking notes. A man in the back row wouldn't look at me. Defense attorney's cross-examination was exactly as brutal as I'd been warned. He asked if I'd been arguing with my boyfriend before the accident, if our relationship had problems, if I'd suspected he was interested in someone else. I answered honestly. Yes, we'd been arguing more. Yes, he'd seemed distant. No, I'd never suspected my best friend. Isn't it true, the defense attorney said, that you've weaponized a tragic accident to punish your ex-boyfriend for moving on? My attorney objected. The judge sustained it, but the question hung in the air anyway. We broke for lunch. I sat in a witness room, unable to eat, while my attorney reviewed the afternoon's testimony. He kept saying I was doing great, that the jury was sympathetic. I didn't feel great. I felt exposed. The afternoon session focused on the pregnancy. My attorney walked me through learning I was pregnant while unconscious, waking up to find out only after a nurse's mistake, confronting my boyfriend and having him admit he'd known for weeks. Why do you think he hid it from you? My attorney asked. Because he was already planning a future with her, I said. And I didn't fit into it. Defense objected. Judge allowed it to stand. Then came the medical records. Photos of ultrasounds my boyfriend had seen. Consent forms he'd signed. Notes from doctors about discussing the pregnancy's viability with him. Did he ever mention any of these conversations to you? My attorney asked. Never. Not even once? Not even once. My roommate testified the next day. She wore all black like she was going to a funeral. Kept crying on the stand, saying she never meant to hurt anyone. That love just happened. That she'd been trying to be a good friend by visiting me in the hospital. The prosecutor asked her when the affair started. She hesitated, said it was complicated. That there had been feelings for a while but nothing physical until after the accident. My attorney stood up with the box of cards and photos. Asked her to identify the dates. Her face went white. So when you say after the accident, he said, you mean after you'd already been secretly dating him for 9 months? She couldn't answer. Just cried harder. The judge had to call a recess. My boyfriend took the stand that afternoon, wore a suit, clean-shaven, looked like a completely different person from the man who used to fall asleep on my couch watching baseball. His attorney walked him through the accident, how traumatic it had been for him too, how he'd been devastated seeing me in the hospital, how he'd made the difficult decision not to tell me about the pregnancy because he didn't want to add stress. I was trying to protect her, he said, looking directly at the jury. The doctors said stress could cause complications. I thought if she didn't know, she wouldn't worry. My attorney's cross-examination was methodical. He pulled up the phone records showing texts to my roommate from my hospital room, asked my boyfriend to read them aloud. I can't wait to touch you again. Being here is torture when all I want is to be with you. She doesn't suspect anything. The courtroom was completely silent. My boyfriend kept reading, his voice getting quieter. When he finished, my attorney asked, "Does that sound like someone trying to protect his girlfriend from stress?" No answer. "Does that sound like someone who cared about her pregnancy?" "I did care," my boyfriend said. "I was confused and made mistakes." "You made choices," my attorney corrected. "You chose to text your mistress from your pregnant girlfriend's hospital bed. You chose to hide her pregnancy from her. You chose to continue an affair while she was fighting to survive." Defense attorney objected. Judge sustained it. But again, the words were already out there. The medical expert testimony came next. A maternal fetal medicine specialist explained how placental abruptions work, what the risks were, what my prognosis had been. She testified that stress absolutely could have contributed to the pregnancy loss. "Can you say definitively that stress caused the miscarriage?" Defense asked on cross. "No," the specialist admitted, "but given the timeline and the patient's emotional state, it was certainly a contributing factor." My therapist testified about my PTSD, my depression, my anxiety. Read from her notes about sessions where I described the betrayal, the hidden pregnancy, the feeling of my body being used as a battlefield for someone else's affair. "In your professional opinion," my attorney asked, "what impact did learning about the hidden pregnancy have on her mental health?" "Catastrophic," my therapist said. She already felt violated by the affair. Learning her pregnancy had been hidden from her, that medical decisions were being made without her knowledge while she was unconscious. It destroyed her sense of bodily autonomy. The defense tried to suggest I'd been dramatic, that I was playing up symptoms for the lawsuit. My therapist shut that down immediately, pulled out hospitalization records from when I'd tried to hurt myself 3 months after the miscarriage. I hadn't wanted that coming out. My attorney had asked if I was comfortable with it. I'd said yes because it was true and it mattered. 2 jurors were openly crying now. The foreman looked furious. The man in the back row still wouldn't look at me, but he was gripping his pen so hard his knuckles were white. Closing arguments happened on a Friday. Defense went first, painting a picture of a tragic accident and a relationship that had run its course. Young people making mistakes, bad timing, nothing malicious, just human weakness. My attorney's closing was different. He didn't focus on sympathy. He focused on choices. "This case is about choices," he said, standing in front of the jury. "The choice to text while driving. The choice to continue an affair with your girlfriend's best friend. The choice to hide a pregnancy from someone while making medical decisions on their behalf. The choice to value your own comfort over someone else's right to know what was happening in their own body." He walked through the timeline. Every text, every lie, every moment my boyfriend and my roommate had chosen each other over basic human decency. "They want you to believe this was about love," he said. "But love doesn't cause accidents through negligence. Love doesn't hide pregnancies. Love doesn't turn someone's trauma into an opportunity." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway with my mom, not talking, just waiting. Every time the door opened, I expected them to say there was a verdict, but it was always just someone getting coffee or using the bathroom. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., they called us back in. The jury filed in, not looking at anyone. The foreman stood. "In the matter of damages," he said, "we find in favor of the plaintiff." I didn't hear the dollar amount at first. My attorney had to repeat it. $2.8 million $1, $2 million in compensatory damages, $1.6 million in punitive damages. My boyfriend went pale. My roommate put her head in her hands. Their attorneys requested an appeal immediately. Outside the courthouse, my attorney explained what happens next. They'd appeal, probably claiming the damages were excessive. It would take months, maybe years. I might not see any money for a long time. I didn't care about the money. I cared that 12 strangers had listened to everything and decided I was right. That what had been done to me was wrong enough to punish. The local news picked up the story. By morning, it was on social media. Someone from the jury had talked, shared details that made it sound even worse than it was. Suddenly, I was getting messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. Some supportive, some accusatory, some just nosy. My roommate deleted all her social media. My boyfriend made his private. Too late. Screenshots were everywhere. People had found their employers, their families, their new apartment. Someone had created a hashtag. I stayed off social media entirely, blocked everyone except close friends and family, focused on physical therapy and getting my strength back. 3 months after the verdict, my boyfriend's attorney called. They wanted to settle the appeal. Offered $1.9 million to make it go away. My attorney said it was a good offer, that appeals could reduce damages anyway, that taking the money now guaranteed something. I said no. We'd won a trial. Let the appeals court decide. They increased the offer to $2.1 million, then $2.3 million. Each time my attorney would call, explain the risks, recommend I consider it. Each time I said no. The appeals court heard arguments 6 months later. By then I'd moved to a different city, started a new job, was seeing a new therapist. I'd rebuilt my life into something that didn't include either of them. The court reduced the punitive damages to $1.1 million, but upheld everything else. Total award was $2.3 million, which was exactly what they'd offered to settle for. My attorney called it a win. I called it validation. The money came through 4 months after that. After attorney fees, court costs, and taxes, I cleared about $1.4 million, enough to pay off all my medical bills, buy a small house, and put the rest away. I donated $50,000 to a foundation supporting pregnancy loss research, another $30,000 to a legal aid fund for women dealing with reproductive coercion. My mom helped me set up the rest in investments, told me to be smart, not emotional, to build a future instead of dwelling on the past. I tried, got promoted at my new job, started dating again, cautiously, made new friends who didn't know my story unless I chose to tell them. But some things don't heal just because time passes. I still have nightmares about the accident. Still flinch when I hear sudden car horns. Still check and recheck that my doors are locked at night. I still can't have close female friendships without wondering when they'll betray me. Still can't be in hospitals without feeling my chest tighten. Still think about the baby sometimes. Wonder who they would have been, if they'd have had his eyes or my nose. If they'd have been funny or serious or some combination neither of us expected. My therapist says trauma doesn't follow timelines. That healing isn't linear. That some wounds scar over but never disappear completely. 5 years after the accident, I'm doing better. I own my house. I have a career I'm proud of. I've been in a healthy relationship for 8 months with someone who thinks what happened to me was unforgivable. I ran into my former roommate once at a conference in Seattle. She saw me first, turned around, and walked the other way. I let her go. Whatever she's carrying, it's not my problem anymore. My boyfriend I never saw again, heard through mutual connections that he'd moved across the country, that he and my roommate had broken up within a year, that he'd struggled to find work after the trial publicity. I felt nothing hearing it. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just nothing. Sometimes people ask if I regret the lawsuit, if it was worth it, going through all that pain publicly, if the money made up for everything. The money didn't make up for anything. The money was just money. But standing in that courtroom, having 12 people say I deserve justice, having a judge agree that what happened to me was worth punishing, that mattered. Not because it healed me, but because it meant the truth was on record. That someone could look back at what happened and know I hadn't deserved it. That I'd fought back when everything in me wanted to just disappear. My mom asked me once what I'd do if either of them tried to apologize now, years later. If they showed up wanting forgiveness or closure. I told her I'd probably close the door. Not out of anger. Just out of understanding that some doors once closed should stay that way. She said that was wise. That forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's just about letting go of the weight you've been carrying. I'm still learning how to do that. Still figuring out which parts of this I need to hold on to and which parts I can finally release. The trial changed things in ways I didn't expect. Local news coverage turned into regional coverage. Then a journalist from a major publication reached out, wanting to do a longer piece about medical autonomy and reproductive coercion. I said no at first. I'd had enough of being public. But my attorney suggested it might help other women in similar situations. That visibility could push for legal reforms. So I agreed to an interview, spent 3 hours talking to a reporter named Vanessa who'd covered medical ethics cases for 15 years. She was professional, kind, didn't push when I needed breaks. The article came out 2 months later. It was good, fair. She'd interviewed legal experts about the gaps in laws protecting pregnant women, talked to medical ethicists about consent and patient autonomy, used my case as the centerpiece but made it about bigger issues. Letters started coming after that. Women who'd had similar experiences, some less extreme, some worse. Women whose partners had made medical decisions without them. Women who discovered affairs during vulnerable times. Women who felt like their bodies had been battlegrounds for other people's choices. I didn't know how to respond at first. What could I say that would help? But I started writing back. Short notes mostly. Sharing my attorney's name for those who asked. Offering the name of my therapist's practice for those who needed it. One woman's letter stood out. She was 18 weeks pregnant when she found out her husband had been having an affair with her sister. He'd caused a car accident while arguing with the sister on the phone. The baby survived, but she had complications. He'd hidden treatment options from her, made decisions that prioritized his comfort over her health. She'd been too afraid to do anything, thought no one would believe her, thought she deserved it somehow. Reading her letter felt like looking in a mirror from years ago. I called her. We talked for 2 hours. I told her about my attorney, about building evidence, about the fact that she deserved better than what she was getting. She filed for divorce 3 weeks later, requested full custody, started building her own case. 6 months after that, she sent me a photo. Her and her baby daughter, healthy and happy, in their new apartment. The caption said, "Thank you for showing me I could fight back." I put that photo on my refrigerator. Still there today. My story opened doors I hadn't expected. I was invited to speak at a women's health conference, then a legal symposium about reproductive rights, then a support group for women dealing with pregnancy loss. I said yes to all of it. Found I had things to say. That my experience, as painful as it was, had given me perspective others needed. The speaking led to consulting work. Law firms would bring me in on cases involving medical deception or pregnancy-related negligence. I'd review records, help attorneys understand the emotional impact, sometimes testify as an expert witness on what it feels like to have your autonomy stolen. It became a second career. I kept my day job, but spent evenings and weekends helping other women build cases. Some won. Some settled. A few lost, which hurt more than I expected. But every single one of them told me the same thing. That fighting back mattered. That having someone believe them mattered. That knowing they weren't alone changed everything. 7 years after the accident, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. It was my former roommate. Her voice was different. Older. Tired. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she said. "But I needed to tell you something." I almost hung up. But curiosity won. "I was diagnosed with cancer," she continued. Stage 3. I'm doing treatment, but the prognosis isn't great. I waited. Didn't know what to say. Being sick has given me a lot of time to think, she said. About what I did to you. About the person I was. I can't make excuses anymore. I was cruel. I was selfish. And I'm sorry. The apology sat between us like a physical thing. I don't expect forgiveness, she added. I just needed you to know that I understand now. What I took from you. What I helped him take from you. There's no justification for it. I sat there holding the phone, feeling nothing and everything at once. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. I hope your treatment goes well. That's it? She asked. That's all you have to say? What else do you want me to say? I asked. That I forgive you? That we can be friends again? That your cancer somehow erases what you did? Silence. I don't wish you harm, I said. But I also don't owe you absolution. You made choices. You lived with them. Now you're dealing with something terrible and you want to clear your conscience. I understand that. But my forgiveness isn't going to save you. She was crying. I could hear it. I really am sorry, she whispered. I believe you, I said. But sorry doesn't change anything. I hung up, blocked the number, told my therapist about it in our next session. How do you feel about it? She asked. I don't know, I said. Part of me is glad she apologized. Part of me thinks it's too little, too late. Part of me just doesn't care anymore. All of those feelings can be true at once, my therapist said. She was right. They were. My former roommate died 4 months later. I found out through social media. Mutual friends posting tributes, talking about how brave she'd been, how positive through her treatment. No one mentioned what she'd done to me. To them, it was ancient history. Drama from years ago that didn't matter anymore. I didn't go to the funeral, didn't send flowers, just acknowledged that she was gone and moved on with my day. Some people probably thought I was cold. Maybe I was. But I'd spent years healing from what she'd done. Her death didn't erase that. Didn't require my grief. My current partner asked me about it. We'd been together for 2 years by then. He knew the whole story. Do you feel anything? He asked gently. Relief, maybe, I said. That I don't have to wonder if she'll show up again. Try to make amends. Force herself back into my life. That's fair, he said. It was. And I didn't feel guilty about it. 9 years after the accident, I testified before a state legislative committee. They were considering a bill about medical decision-making for unconscious patients, specifically about requiring consent from the patient themselves once conscious, even if someone else had been making decisions. I told them my story, the whole thing, the affair, the hidden pregnancy, the medical decisions made without my knowledge. The committee members listened, some taking notes, some just staring. When I finished, the chairwoman asked, "What would you want this law to do? If you could design it yourself?" "I'd want it to require that patients be informed of all medical decisions made on their behalf while unconscious," I said, "within 24 hours of regaining consciousness, and that they have the right to review and contest those decisions. That their consent be required for any ongoing treatment, even if someone else initially approved it." The bill passed 6 months later. It wasn't perfect, had some loopholes, but it was something. The governor invited me to the signing ceremony. I stood behind him while he signed, along with other advocates who'd pushed for it. Cameras flashed, people applauded. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was crying. "My boyfriend made decisions about my pregnancy while I was unconscious after a seizure," she said. "He terminated it without telling me. When I woke up, it was already done. I had no idea I'd even been pregnant." My stomach dropped. "I reported it, but nothing happened," she continued. "No charges, no consequences. Everyone said he'd made a medical decision in good faith, but I never got to choose." I gave her my card, connected her with attorneys who specialized in cases like hers, followed up weekly until she felt ready to pursue it. Her case is still ongoing, but she's fighting, and now there's a law that might actually help her. That's what matters. Not my pain, not my story, but what it can do for others. 10 years after the accident, I'm living a life I never expected. I'm married to someone who treats me like an equal. We have a daughter, born healthy after a pregnancy I controlled every aspect of. I named her Hope because that felt right. I still do consulting work, still speak at conferences, still help women build cases against people who violated their autonomy. My mom retired and moved closer to me. She watches Hope twice a week, spoils her with books and art supplies, tells her stories about standing up for yourself. I don't think about my ex-boyfriend much anymore. Last I heard, he'd remarried, had kids, moved on completely. I hope he's different with his new family. Hope he learned something. But honestly, I don't care enough to find out. The scars from the accident are still visible. My legs have marks from the surgeries. My pelvis aches when it rains. I can't run like I used to, but I'm here. I'm whole. I built a life from the wreckage of what they did to me. And some days, that's not just enough. It's everything. People ask sometimes what I'd tell my younger self. The woman lying in that hospital bed, broken and betrayed, not knowing what came next. I'd tell her it's going to hurt, that some of it will hurt for years, that there's no shortcut through grief or trauma or rage. But I'd also tell her she's stronger than she knows, that fighting back isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to let someone else's choices define her forever. I'd tell her that justice matters, that speaking truth matters, that her life belongs to her and no one else. And I'd tell her that one day she'll hold her daughter and realize that all of it, every painful step, led to this moment, this life, this second chance she built herself. That would be enough.